Welcome back to another episode of Twisted Metal Companion. I am Peter, and you guys got another special interview today. I've been chomping at the bit to speak to somebody behind the lens. Joining me is director Kitao Sakurai.
Yep.
Hopefully I got it right. I mean, I have a last name that's been butchered over decades, so I'm really used to it. Hey, first off, thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Of course.
Um,
Thank
you
you.
know, yeah, it's a brand new show, it's a brand new podcast, and I know not a lot of people are familiar with me except for MJ. So he's really the only one that's kind of been endorsing what we do here. Upon my brief research, I actually thought you only did 3 episodes until last night. I was like, oh, it's 4 episodes. He did 1, 2, 9, 10.
Mhm.
What other hats do you wear? Because it looks like you're pretty involved with the show other than just directing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think, the main thing was in that, because I directed like the first episode, the pilot episode, I definitely had a hand in, really kind of helping to craft like the look and feel of it. And, like the things that like, Anthony and Stephanie wear and just kind of like the logic of how the sort of, the filmmaking of the show works. Because, what happens is, yeah, as a sort of pilot director, you kind of establish sort of the, like what are the main lenses that you use? Like, what are the main kind of conventions that you use to, cover a scene? What's like the tone that you want the show to have? And then, you know, there needs to be some degree of like consistency throughout the body of the show once that kind of like, tone has been set. So, I would say like that was sort of my main, job and challenge of being the director who does the first the first block of it, is to sort of like kind of set that tone.
Yeah, you mentioned challenge based off of like your previous work, and you've worn a lot of hats. And again, not just director. You've written, and I think you were a consultant on something. I was just trying to briefly go through there. Did you find it challenging because Twisted Metal is such a unique show?
Sure.
Did you find any challenge in like this type of genre, like because it's so blended in comparison to what you have done previously?
Hmm. Well, I mean, I think the big challenge was in the sort of like world building aspect of it. Um, uh, I think MJ and all the writers did such a great job in making sure that we have all our scripts ready to go. Like basically when I came aboard and started shooting, all the scripts for all the episodes were pretty much locked, which is like very unusual for a TV show. Like usually when you start shooting a TV show, the scripts are always being like constantly worked on, and you kind of where the season's headed, but there's still a lot of writing work happening. Whereas I think that MJ was great in making sure that like everything was very kind of buttoned up by the time we started kind of like conceiving of the first block, and so that like we could spend a lot of time and really getting the look and feel down. I think for me as a director, it was like kind of my first time doing such kind of like large scale action set pieces. And I've done car work before, but not to the extent of what we did on the show on Twisted Metal, which was a lot of fun. And for the opening kind of chase sequence in the mall, we spent like almost a week in a like semi-abandoned mall, choreographing everything and trying to do all the stuff that you see pretty much like, for real. For me, I tried to do everything as practically as possible because like the energy that you get from that is great. Obviously there's like a lot of, VFX augmentation and stuff like that. But yeah, directing that kind of scale of action and cars like, hitting each other and shooting at each other and, blowing up and stuff like that was, obviously just like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun, and when we talk about the first couple episodes, we'll just kind of combine scenes and stuff.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the mall scene. Some of the stores definitely take us kind of down down like a memory lane, so to speak. Did you guys have to find signs for some of these stores that no longer exist, or were they already there? Is that VFX?
Yeah. A lot of signs had to be created. Some were VFX augmentation, but for the most part, we actually like made signs for, like the GameStop and all the kind of early 2000s throwback references had to be created.
Now, Sweet Tooth, we don't. I think I need some clarification. When we first see Sweet Tooth at the end of 101, what is he doing exactly? Is he listening to some like Drew Hill? Like well, he's gyrating, right? Like what is that going on there?
I mean, I think the idea is that like he's listening to music and then he hears John's car in the distance. And he gets, I think, excited about the idea of killing someone new.
Yeah, I feel there's a missed opportunity for any of the editors out there in the fandom to take that sequence and just add some like thong song in the background,
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
Now the episode does drop us in the middle of a chase, and we get some exposition at the very beginning from John. Um, what was the discussion behind like we learn about the fall, and is there a discussion as to like how much do we want to reveal exactly what happened, other than like the fall is the event, and that's all we kind of know?
Yeah, and in fact, I would say like a lot of that discussion happened after we shot the like after we shot everything because most of that footage is generated in the edit. So like there's like flybys and stuff like that. You know like if other footage was taken and like John's car was kind of like put in other shots. Uh uh and that really helps to like kind of expand the world and tell the story of what we see. But I think that's a fairly common thing in filmmaking where it's like the world setting. Generally, it's like only when you've kind of seen a cut of the episode do you really realize like, oh, we actually really need to tell this piece of story to have the audience understand what we as filmmakers already know. So I think that's an instance of that where like a lot of those choices like kind of were made more later on rather than early on.
With character of Sweet Tooth, played by Samoa Joe, the wrestler, and obviously voiced by Will Arnett. Can you talk about the discussion in the decision in having Will Arnett voice him as opposed to Joe?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think Joe did an amazing job, and Joe also like voiced it really well. I think we wanted to, obviously Will brings like such a unique kind of characterization to Sweet Tooth, but we also wanted to be able to have Joe be loose with the character. So what we did was we had Joe perform all the lines and all the dialogue, which he did excellently. And then after we kind of like cut it all together, Will kind of went in and did his like his spin on those lines and kind of like punched him up and kind of like added extra flair and obviously his own kind of perspective on the character.
Yeah, and so on the subject of Sweet Tooth again, I'm sure on paper, right, we have the thong song sequence, and that was also the first sequence that anybody got to see of the show before its actual release. Can you give some insight on the thong song sequence, and then also we can talk about like his performance and the idea of him performing for John and Quiet.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the thong song is just so like iconically of its time. And it was just such a funny idea to kind of like have Sweet Tooth be this sort of like almost like pop culture obsessed kind of character. And so to like really rally around thong song, um, uh, just felt, so funny and so good.
Yeah, yeah, and then so like I I know that Sweet Tooth tells Quiet and John about like, oh yeah, basically, I'm forgetting the exact language, but it's like nobody's really lasted all three acts or whatever the case was of his performance. Can you talk about filming that? And because I feel you guys were trying to make the viewers also kind of feel like how dreadful the experience is to actually sit and watch Sweet Tooth perform. Is that what
Yeah.
you guys were looking for?
Yeah. I would say so. I would say so. Sorry. What was the questions? I missed.
Just basically like kind of like because it kind of goes on, right? And then
Yeah.
you kind of see how like John and Kwai kind of have to sit through this,
Yeah.
and we understand that like nobody's really survived his performances,
Right.
right? And then like his because it does feel like I think feel people kind of feel the length of
Yeah.
that sequence. Yeah, and was that the idea behind it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we wanted it to seem like, he's like, the only thing he knows is like this hotel in room kind of like a TV broadcast. And so the idea of like making like a 3-4 hour stage show just about that broadcast is like, obviously like super boring. And then so that's kind of like what we tried to show with that sequence.
Yeah, because not gonna lie, like the very first time I watched it, I go, I feel this could have been trimmed. And then I guess I kind of started thinking about like what Sweet Tooth was telling them, and
Yeah.
get like skeleton and like cadavers or whatever. And so like that made sense to me. Um, the characters of Mike and Stu, which were introduced in episode two, in the video games, they come off as like stoner. I remember the first game, vaguely remember the second, but that was pretty much it. So like, I don't even remember those characters. Can you talk about introducing those characters and putting a different spin on them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think all the choices of like, you know, who to make a character and whatnot, like they're like opportunities for like great actors and great characters to kind of like arise out of not much substance in the game. Like it's not like the game is like super character developed and like all these characters have like incredible elaborate backstories. It's like a melee game, right? So I think it was just an opportunity to have like a really great kind of buddy dynamic, and like a really great kind of like alternate set of characters, to be able to focus on. And Mike and Taj, who played Mike and Stu, are just so great. And I've certainly worked with Mike Mitchell before, who's a great comedian. And Yeah, it was just a really great opportunity to have like additional kind of like levity and comic relief and just to show another side of this world.
Yeah, I got a chance to hang out with Taj during the summer, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I traveled over to the East Coast and he was in town and I knew he was a part of the show and we linked up. He revealed nothing, but we got to know each other
That's
and
great.
yeah, just talk about like, interests and what have you. Teased a few things, but that was pretty much it. Yeah,
Yeah.
really good guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like those characters, and I was really surprised like what we got out of Stu. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that was really nice to see. So to fast forward to episodes 9 and 10, you got some really big epic sequences in there as well. I'm trying to remember nine. So a lot of episode nine, there's a lot of interactions between John and Quiet. Can you talk about like them bonding over, I guess, kind of like customizing overkill or roadkill?
Yeah. Roadkill. Yeah.
Roadkill a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, that sequence really, it's like they're, kind of building this car together, but what it's showing is their relationship and like how far they've come and, where they're at now. And, I think John finally being able to apologize to Quiet and to sort of like, own some of his mistakes rather than kind of talking his way out of them. I think that's sort of like the kind of like the emotional heart of that sequence. And that's kind of, really what like sets up the stakes of what's to come in 10 and their relationship and, really kind of creating like a full arc of their relationship together throughout the season. I think that's kind of what to me that sequence is about.
Yeah, I mean, you guys really flesh out the characters, and I think that's one of the things that I noticed on Twitter because I try to engage with other people too, bring some attention to the show and obviously what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess this question I could have asked early on. When it comes to Easter eggs, and because this is adapted from a video game from the 90s, can you talk about discussions about certain Easter eggs? Like obviously in episode one, we get the one with the twisted metal video game on John's Winchfield. How do you guys decide when and where and which Easter eggs to include?
Well, I mean, yeah, MJ and Grant and a lot of the writers like really were huge Twisted Metal fans. And so, a lot of those Easter eggs really are written into the scripts and were kind of decided beforehand as things that, we really want to like show, to people who have like a keen eye. And I think that like, people who grew up playing the game and really appreciate the game really like those Easter eggs because it's like, it speaks to them, it's like, it's not just an excuse to tell a story with like the loose concept of Twisted Metal. It's like, really trying to honor like the game and like if you love the game growing up, and you see some of these like Easter eggs and references, you're like, oh yeah, that's amazing, I love that. So it's really about like, I think, kind of honoring the gamers who are watching the show.
I love that, and that is no surprise to me, having covered Cobra Kai for 5 seasons and
Mhm.
interviewing MJ 5 times for his episodes. That show is very much like all those people grew up with Karate Kid.
Yeah,
And so I love hearing that like the writers, they were all fans of the show too, not just like, oh, this person would be good for your show.
right.
They have that background and the gamers, they can, like these are their people. So it shows that extra love,
Yeah,
and so I think that's why David Jaffe, the creator of those games, loves the show because he's like,
right,
they understood the games.
right, right.
Yeah. And clearly everyone involved understood the assignment.
Yeah.
Um, all right, just taking a look at how we're looking here. So we're getting close towards the end here. So episode 10 just has so much. Actually, well, let's kind of wrap up with episode 9.
Sure.
We kind of see like as everyone's getting to what do you guys call that sequence, or at least all the abandoned vehicles? Do you guys have a name for that place?
We call that sort of like the what do we call it? Like the
Vehicle graveyard.
graveyard.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So the graveyard, as John and Quiet and company start to approach the graveyard, we also see Stu and Mike with Sweet Tooth. Can you talk about like I mean, I'm sure this is all on paper as well. Having the patience to wait until towards the end of the season to finally show Sweet Tooth with his head on fire.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like it was really effective, I think, to hold out on that, to like, because I think at a certain point people were like, they're not going to do the hair on fire, and then to like finally pull it out at the end, like it's such like a great like surprise for everybody who's like, they're not going to do it, and then they're like, oh my god, they did it, that's amazing. It's like that's the kind of feeling that you want to inspire, I think. So it doesn't like, it doesn't like get old, but it's just sort of like a really welcome thing for the like, like if you made it, like, oh, I've watched the whole season and you really like this character, it's like a great just sort of like treat at the end, I think.
Yeah, it's just I don't think we're talking about it enough, but the reaction is right there. You guys got the right reaction that you guys were going for from the fans. You're right, because if you show it early on, it's like, oh, cool, they included that, but then that's pretty much it, and whether it'll be on fire or not. But I feel definitely when we did like when we started discussing like the trailer breakdowns before we got, the season and any real footage, we were kind of like, oh, are they going to actually do it? And my theory was, I think, maybe there's something like outwardly of him, maybe if he's a spirit, if it's a spiritual thing, maybe his hair will be on fire then. But I think that moment is definitely earned because it comes towards the end and for you guys to actually do it. And at the moment it happens right before this big vehicle
Yeah.
brawl, I think it really gets people amped up and it ends with that. And then obviously you continue with the first one. So obviously you guys didn't like Joe's hair on fire. Um, was that a difficult sequence to film, at the end of 109?
The kind of like ramping up, like the hair lighting.
Yeah, yeah. Well, with that tree.
I mean, not particularly, like, because we were kind of planning for it. We knew that his hair was going to light on fire. And what we did was like obviously like all the fire is VFX, but we had just to get sort of like a lighting effect on kind of like Joe and everything like that. We kind of like had lights built into the car to get sort of like that firelight reflected. And there was a lot of discussion about how we do that. Like, do we, like have something built into, like Joe's kind of like mask and stuff like that. And eventually we, ended decided not to have anything kind of like built in lighting wise, but did it more with like lighting around him. But it was a pretty subtle effect, and also like in like the kind of like the sort of like post credit sequence in 10, when you see Joe at night, like we basically had like a lighting operator like hold a light, kind of above Joe, and sort of for those some of those POV shots, kind of create like a fire effect, with just lighting to kind of replicate that fire.
All right, and we'll just put a pin on that end sequence there for sure.
Yeah.
Questions, yeah. And so episode 10, we kind of start off with that. A lot of vehicles are moving, a lot of characters are there, are present at the time. How did you guys kind of in preparation to film that? How do you guys stage all that? Do you guys is that all virtually? Do you guys have like a little miniature version of the graveyard with vehicles and moving around? How to decide where to move cameras and stuff?
Yeah, it was kind of all the above. It was a very complex sequence to shoot, incredibly complicated. Certainly the most complex sequence that I've ever shot. And what we did was we had basically a big digital diagram, where we, kind of, placed cars, and also had miniatures that we sort of like, decided where the cars would be and what would happen. And then we kind of took that information and made like a full set of storyboards, for to show exactly what would be happening, and who's talking to who, and those storyboards helped not only guide myself as we were shooting, but simultaneous to like what I was shooting, we also had like a second unit, like a stunt unit, getting some more of the wide exterior, like cars blowing up, that would take a long time to set up and kind of like rig. So basically, like I was working in tandem with our second unit director, Clay Cullen, to kind of like make the most out of our days, because it was just so much to get through, obviously.
Yeah, it's really great, and I think somebody on Twitter was talking to MJ about it. Like they got the Avengers feel,
Yeah.
like all the cards are coming together. It's really great. Any insight you'd like to share about the decision to turn away from when Agent Stone shoots himself?
Um.
The whole TV trope of like
Yeah.
no body, no, no death.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's more effective as something that's implied rather than like showing somebody blow their brains out, Um, uh, uh, it just seemed like a more fitting end to his character, I would say.
It actually almost kind of bookends Loud, right, in the first
Yeah,
episode.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I just put that two and two together.
totally.
Um, Later on, we get John finally at New San Francisco and all that. I don't know if I have any huge questions that I want to ask in the little time we have left, but I love the Easter egg of MJ's assistant as the pizza boy, the pizza boy. So I knew Jorge by name because
Yeah,
I've obviously, corresponded with him. And so I had never really seen his face until Twitter, but even that's like a small profile
yeah,
picture. And then I was just going through the credits one day, I go, oh, that's Jorge. That's awesome.
yeah.
So that was really fun to see. Um, can you let's just I think we are running low on time here. So we'll just kind of wrap it up right here. But yeah, can you talk about like the kind of the way it ends, like teasing the tournament for a possible season two, and then also the end sequence. Like I actually missed it on my very first binge. I didn't
Mhm.
know there was one until somebody brought it up. I was like, wait, what? So I had to go back and I was like, that's got to be a dream sequence. There's no way to set up Mike and Stu and then like give them an unceremonious death. I don't know, but I'm not sure what you're able to share as well.
I mean, I think that's very like I, I don't know if I can say anything about what will happen to their characters in season two. I mean, like it's meant to be like what happened, you know. So I'll just leave it as like what you see on screen, you know.
I will add this little tidbit. I had spoken with Stacey Perry, head of the special effects makeup department, and she told me that her direction was it's based off a video game. Anything could happen. Anybody can be back. Because
Yeah.
I asked about like, well, that was splatter. Like, what was the direction? Like what kind of damage or injury was this? So I was trying to just kind of probe a little bit. So I mean, because we saw a couple characters that were pinned up that were like, well, they're coming back. I thought they died, kind of thing. So I think they're always. Now, what about Axel? You guys do show a picture of Axel. Was
Mhm.
that the tease? What was the discussion behind that? Showing that little picture.
Well, I mean, I think there's a strong desire to have Axel come in as a character in season two. It's like I think everybody wants that, you know. I'm sure if there's a season two, like we'll be seeing Axel.
Yeah, and so and leave it with this. Anything you want to tell like the new fans of the show? Because it's not greenlit. There's obviously writers and actors strike right now. Hopefully,
Yep.
there's a reasonable agreement that can come sooner than later, so everyone can get back to doing what they love. What can you tell? The fans, in terms of like the waiting game now at this point for new news.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we have to wait for the strike to be over, and I agree. Like just really hope that everybody comes to a good agreement. Um, uh, uh, because I think there is a lot of passion behind the show, like both on, the side of us that make it, and also like the fans who, really helped, propel the show to being, one of Peacock's most popular shows. Like, really appreciate that, and appreciate all the love and the fact that people really kind of I think appreciate the show for exactly what it is. It's loud and crazy and like silly and violent and like it's meant to kind of like honor the spirit of the game, but also have a lot of like heart and soul to it. And I think people really responded to that and really kind of like get that and understand it. So that's just like a really kind of satisfying thing. And, hopefully we'll have the opportunity to, bring you guys more of it.
Absolutely. I know everybody, is just chomping at the bit to share their stories and share all the pictures, that they're holding on to because they can't, promote. And I've built some relationships as kind of like an unofficial insider, just being somebody like, well, like someone to just kind of like lend an ear to, bend an ear. And so I'm never the type to spoil or leak anything too. So I think if people see that I try to, create honest content and, just sharing stories is what I'm really about. So, thank you so much for your time. And if anybody, part of the cast and crew that is watching this, let me address you guys. Obviously, Kitao, you mentioned like the record you guys broke for Peacock is just the finished product. It is a fun ride. And, I'm sure you guys are really, it's clear you guys are very proud of it. But, like me, on behalf of the fans, it's an amazing show. Can't wait for season two. I'll cut it off right here. Maybe speak to you after I stop recording. But thank you for your time. But thank you for everybody tuning to this, and thank you guys for your guys' support.
Thank you so much.